You're live.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Artie C. Nelson. I am a child adolescent psychiatrist practicing in Birmingham, Alabama, private practice, trained in Los Angeles at King Drew Medical Center and also Cedars-Sinai.
Okay. Dr. Nelson, I know we spoke before about inherited family trauma. Correct. Can you explain what that is?
Yes, it's a term that we've now used to describe generational PTSD. In other words, it could be your grandfather, it could be your great-grandfather may have had some incident that had happened, but we see it in generations later. And it's really starting to get a lot more attention with some of the focus on some of the civil rights museums that are opening up in various cities. I had the experience of taping a documentary. We took a group down to Montgomery to the new Equal Justice Museum. And when we got there, when you go through the first part, you see a lot of the videos of things that had happened in the 60s and earlier. And a lot of the individuals, even ones that are professional, had symptoms that occurred while they were there and on the bus ride back. Very emotional. Some were just not able to speak at all. And it was just an eye-opener to me, but it was also very traumatic for a lot of people. So it reinforced what I had been seeing in my practice, that a lot of times the symptom that we see in a child relates back to several generations before, some kind of trauma that had happened. And I started hearing about it years ago. Like I said, I trained at a predominantly Jewish hospital, and they would bring in folks that had survived the Holocaust. But they would see in their children symptoms related to, even in their language, of being gassed, feeling like they were suffocated, feeling like there were marks on their arms when they weren't. So it comes out in what they call the core language. It's a book called It Didn't Start With You by Mark Woolen, therapist out in San Francisco, that talks about this quite a bit.
So, just so I understand it better, so even if the child never heard stories about this, never seen it on TV or anywhere like that, they can experience some symptoms from generations ago.
Correct. There is a therapist in Mount Sinai, New York, that studied women that had witnessed 9/11, and they were pregnant. So they either saw it on television or they saw or were in that vicinity, and their children had symptoms of PTSD when they were born. So they were pregnant during the 9/11, and it just passed on through generations. They've seen it. Emory has done a study with rats because they can see several generations in a rat's family structure. It takes 12 weeks per generation. And they saw the same thing. If they traumatized a rat and exposed them to this sweet smelling scent, the children or the offspring of that rat would actually respond to that scent as if they were being shocked. And they had never been exposed to the scent. And an area in their brain would actually be more sensitive to that particular scent. So it's very interesting, and we're seeing it a lot more, and it relates to why I was seeing children with these symptoms, and it was no specific reason for it.
Okay. So also, I gotta ask, as a parent, some things, as a parent, you're learning as you go, right?
Sure.
And some things that the child may be exposed to when they're young, let's say 2, 3, 4 years old, are they gonna remember that? Is that gonna come out later on in life?
It's a good question. The pediatricians, and I was a pediatrician before I did child psychiatry, they call it adverse childhood events. That anything can happen to you when you're very young, 2, 3, 4 years old, and then later on you will have behavioral problems related to what happened to that event. And that's a relatively new term also. And again, you're right. Now, it doesn't mean that a major, you know, your child falls out the crib,
right.
that sort of thing, and it's going to be afraid of heights. But it could be something a little bit more than that. You know, parents get a divorce, you know, maybe a fire in the house, something that's significant. They can have behavioral problems or symptoms of anxiety later on in life. And it's a matter of just getting a really good history. And a lot of times, you know, particularly in our field, when we're rushed, a lot of times you don't ask the right questions. So it really involves us slowing down and getting a really good history about what has happened in the family, what has happened generationally, but also what has happened early on. Because a lot of people forget, you know, and particularly in African American community, the stigma of mental illness in general, a lot of times they don't want to talk about it. So you got to really probe, make it more interesting. We are doing something in Birmingham. We're going out to barbershops, particularly for the African American male, and not doing therapy, but having them in a group setting in the barbershop. You know, things come up in the barbershop. You talk about almost everything, and we've been able to get people to come in and feel more comfortable talking to mental health professionals because of that setting. You know, we've taken it out of the clinical setting in an office or in the hospital, and that's been a way to get to that history so you can find out what has happened. And it's been a real eye-opener for me, because I've seen some interesting cases where dad was incarcerated and this young man did not know anything about that for years, but he knew that there was something going on with his father and himself in that relationship, and he had difficulty and felt closed in, and you find out, oh, this is the reason why. So it's very important. But to answer your question, yes, early childhood traumas can affect a child, but it has to be a significant trauma.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then that brings up a good question then, just talking about generations and that trauma from generations ago affecting whatever generation is now.
Correct.
So how do you stop that? How do you stop that generational whatever?
The book Dr. Woolen talks about is, like I said, it didn't start with you. Core language. He says if you listen enough, and we know that just in psychiatry in general, people will say in their language things that are triggers to kind of get to working through their problems. But you have to talk about it. I was seeing a newscaster in Birmingham, and there was a lynching in the family of one of their relatives, and she was from North Carolina, now moved to Birmingham, but no one in the family would talk about it. She found out about it by a neighbor or something, but it happened. She would go home for family reunions, and no one would talk about it. There was a shame associated with it. There was a fear to talk about it. What we saw at the Equal Justice Museum was the same thing, and I don't know if you've seen that on the news where Oprah went down to see with Brian Stevenson. Yes, and we saw people that knew that story and never talked about it. And they broke down just seeing the names and the situation that happened. So yeah, to answer your question, it really is something that you have to talk about it. You can work through it. There's role playing you can do to see what you would have said to that uncle or that person that did the sexual abuse. You know, you work through it. But if you don't talk about it, there's no way to really get to the point where you can heal.
Okay. So as far as trying to break down the stereotype or break down the stigma of in the Black community of going to a psychiatrist, you know, can you just explain, I guess, what happens? What happens when you come in, you know, to sort of break that? Because a lot of people who haven't been, you know, they've got these ideas from movies and TV and stuff like that.
Yeah, particularly, I started out as a pediatrician, and then went into psychiatry, and I had a lot of misconceptions about psychiatry myself. You know, I was always the strangest person in the class would go into psychiatry, that sort of thing. And so when I got into psychiatry, I saw it was much more difficult than I thought to try to get people to talk. You know, you can get a lab test and do that in peds and have them out there in 5 minutes. So I did find out, you know, what it was about, and a lot of it is engaging, trying to get a rapport. Almost like anything else, you have to kind of get a rapport, have that person feel comfortable. Obviously, that person's going to feel comfortable with someone that looks like them. So you have a connection culturally. And so what I do is, right from the beginning, I'll ask about their kids or their parents. what do you do as hobbies, you know, and they've already written down what they're coming to see me about. But I don't touch on that the first time around. Mm-hmm. You know, and the next time I say, well, you know, you were feeling kind of anxious at work. And, you know, what's going on at work? What was going on there? I had a guy that was a real estate person, and he was getting a lot of slack because he wasn't meeting his quota. And he didn't know why. He thought it may have been racism. He thought it may have been something else. And we talked about it. Had you ever had any other experiences with racism? And then he was able to talk about it, and I was able to share some of my stories that I had, you know, as an intern. Mm-hmm. And so we made that connection, and I still see him today, you know, in town sometime, and he'll say, you know, you really helped me out, you know, and I was really anxious about coming to see somebody because I didn't want to be seen as crazy. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's the big thing about thinking that you're crazy going in. And I was able to, you know, show him some things, didn't have to put him on medication. Had him do some more exercise, reduce stress, not work all the time, take a vacation, a real vacation without your phone, without doing work on a computer. Yeah. And we were able to get him better. And so it's really just convincing people that it's not that you're crazy, I'm not going to put you in the hospital. Same thing with kids, trying to show parents that some of this that kids go through in adolescence is just normal adolescent growth. They have to rebel a little bit. Mm-hmm. They have to challenge you, or they won't be able to be healthy adults. So a lot of that parents will see is, oh my goodness, you know, I guess I didn't whip him enough. Mm-hmm. You know, something's going. But I said, you know, he's 16 now. He wants to be a man. And what's his definition of a man? And you know, that sort of. Does he have his driver's license yet? A lot of the millennial generation seems to not want to drive as quickly. When I was growing up, I said that was a big rites of passage, you know. Get that driver's license, you had some freedom. A lot of these guys I'll see 18, 19 don't have their license. And you know, in Birmingham, it's not like they got great mass transit. Yeah. And their mom is still taking them to parties and stuff, and I'm going like, you know, what's the deal here? But you know, we're seeing a different generation. But to answer your question, yeah, it's really engaging people and just trying to make them comfortable. That particularly in African American communities, there's historical reasons for that. You know, that we don't trust the healthcare system, the Tuskegee experiment and others, and so that's a part of it. But just to try to get them to say, hey, look, this is not, you know, I'm not going to put you on medication all the time. I'm not going to throw you in the hospital. It's really going to be, you know, and they leave saying, well, this is okay. This is a lot different than what I thought it was going to be.
Okay. Speaking of being normal, right. There's a lot of, we get a lot of questions about depression. Right. And what depression really is versus maybe you're having a bad day or having the blues.
Right.
What's the difference?
The big difference as far as the duration of time you're feeling sad and the intensity of it. We all feel bad some days, or we'll have a bad day, or something happens at work or at home. But depression is a long, continuous sadness. Most of the time I do a little screening called a PHQ-9, and it looks at the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And it goes over things like, you know, things that you used to like to do, you don't want to do anymore. You sleep a lot or you don't sleep at all, you know, big extremes. You feel like you're letting people down, you feel like a failure. You know, these are triggers that say it's really depression as opposed to just, you know, a mood change where you're having a bad day. We try to screen out any kind of physical thing first, you know, that you could have thyroid disease or you could have something else going on. You could be an early onset diabetic. And that can affect your mood. That can affect your mood, you know, your blood sugar. So a lot of that has to be ruled out first. And again, that's educating folks about coming in. I may refer them to their internist or family doctor and say, hey, you don't really need to see me. My wife's a dermatologist, and a lot of times she'll refer folks to me, and I'm going like, you know, he doesn't really need to see me. He needs to go to his internist. Something's going on physically. And then you find out that he did have a low thyroid problem or something like that. So a lot of it is just really, you know, screening well and seeing if that person really needs to come in. But depression, you know, when it's serious, it's really serious. You know, obviously thoughts of hurting themselves. We are seeing an uptick in depression related to stress, and then certainly the uptick with depression and substance use. We've had even some friends of mine who lost some of their, one was a sibling and one was one of their children to some of the uptick in the substance use and depression.
Yeah.
The lack of joy. Again, and I'm not picking on the millennial generation, but a lot of them will tell me, I just don't know how to feel happy. I just don't feel, what makes you happy? Are you doing what you want to do? Are you doing what somebody else wants you to do? So you got to find out where they have a good job. They may have finished college already, but they're just not happy in what they're doing. And so we got to see if it's depression or something's going on. Sometimes I'll tell them maybe you want to try a different career. And I'm a big proponent of exercise and eating right. Those sort of things can really help you feel better.
Okay. So last question, because we keep going back to stress, and I know it's just prevalent in our society right now. But then when you tell somebody, "Oh, just stop being stressed," it's not like, okay, yeah. So what do you do?
Right.
So what some tangible things that they can leave with and say like, okay, I'll try that. You know what I mean?
You really have to actually name some of the things that you're actually going through. You have to be able to actually write down goals.
Okay.
I give people home assignments. I trained in Los Angeles, so I was around the media a lot. I will suggest certain movies for people. It's shown that just seeing a funny movie can increase your dopamine and help you feel better. Take a real vacation. I said that earlier, not just bringing all the work with you and saying you're on vacation. I see a lot of people here that this is a conference, but they're doing stuff from what they got to do at home, and now with the technology, they're doing chart work, and finishing charts, and all that kind of stuff. So just take a little break. Exercise. Find that hobby that you like to do. Whether it's going fishing, hunting, whatever. Travel, but don't take the work with you when you travel. It's those sort of things that can reduce the stress. If you're in a job that you really don't like, you may have to make some changes there. We talk about mindfulness, focusing on the now. And I always tell people that if you are doing meditation and prayer, which I think is similar, that can be helpful. But take that time every day. It doesn't have to be a long time to just wind down 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, maybe in the morning and also in the evening, and just to wind down and just sort of take it easy. Don't have, TV can stress you out, watching the news. We suggest maybe 15 minutes of it to find out what's going on, check out the weather and all that, but not really get caught up in the back and forth of, all the different channels and all that stuff that we're seeing in the news today. So there's a lot of practical things you can do that have been done for years. Take a walk, and you and your spouse take a walk in the evening, and just relax. But it's easier, but it is still hard because we're so on this treadmill. Got to do this, got to take care of the kids, got to do this. You just have to find the time. A lot of people say, I don't have time to exercise, but they'll spend 2 hours, binge watching something on Netflix. I say, you could have did that in front of your treadmill or your bicycle and still watch, but do that. And then when they do it, they come back and say, man, you were right. I started exercising 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, and I feel better. And I don't have to take that medication. And I said, great, that's what we want to see.
Yeah. Awesome having you here. How can people find you online?
I am on, my website's nelsonwellness.com. And I also have my email is also nelsonwellnessmd@gmail.com.
Okay. All right, you heard it here first at the NMA 2018. Thank you, Dr.
All right, thank you.
Yes,
all right.